Let's speak now with Peter Draper. He's a professor and executive director at the Institute for International Trade at the University of Adelaide. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. So first of all, the 90 days have come and gone without 90 deals. Would a few more weeks make a difference?
None at all, I suspect. So I think we've got 87 deals now, and they're only framework deals. They're not actual trade agreements. So there's a very long way to go in this process, I think. Extra time will deliver extra framework deals, but that still means a lot of negotiation still has to take place. And we should also recall that the US is not exactly in negotiations mode. It's in demand-making mode. And for the most part, just expecting countries to concede and then concede some more. So even whether these would be final deals is very much up in the air, in my view.
And Professor, a new batch of letters sent to countries that include the Philippines and Brunei, this following others aimed at key Asian and ASEAN nations. Many of them just happen to be major trading partners of China. I mean, what's your read on how Washington is sequencing its tariff strategy and its view of Asia?
Well, it's pretty clear that they're targeting what the IMF calls the connector countries. So these are countries that have benefited from relocation of Chinese and other countries' investments out of China into Southeast Asia particularly, but also into Mexico, Ireland, and elsewhere. So what they're trying to do is target countries with the resultant higher trade surpluses with the United States, obviously Vietnam, top of the list, but also Malaysia, Thailand, etc. And essentially block those imports, particularly the China-sourced imports, from coming into the United States. And that explains the relatively high reciprocal tariffs that those countries have ended up with. And there's essentially a two-tier band. So there's the reciprocal tariff, and then as Vietnam received a transshipment tariff that would kick in if US customs deems that certain goods have been sourced or transshipped from China. And that just injects an extra element of uncertainty into trade with the United States.
Professor, I'd like to look at the Philippines. So its tariff has actually been raised to 20% from 17% earlier. And the Philippines ranks among America's top 50 trading partners. First of all, is this economically justified, seeing as the US logged a nearly $5 billion goods trade deficit with the Philippines last year? And what implications might this have for US relationship with the Philippines, especially in the South China Sea issue, as well as Manila's broader alignment with Washington on regional security issues?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the Trump administration and President Trump himself, in the first instance, focuses almost exclusively on trade deficits and goods trades deficits. So he completely ignores the services account or services trade, where the US has substantial strengths and surpluses with a whole range of countries. So no, from a trade economist's point of view, it doesn't make any sense at all. And then treaty allies with the United States, like the Philippines, Australia, Japan in our region, but also think about how the Europeans are being treated, they don't get any favorable treatment. And in fact, in some ways, they're treated even worse than some of the US's long-standing geopolitical foes like Russia, not so much China, because China has a huge trade surplus with the United States. And I think that is what's driving US foreign policy vis-a-vis China at the moment, is not so much the security considerations.
At the same time, Donald Trump floating 50% tariff from Brazil. How much of this move is more about domestic U.S. politics and Trump's alignment with Bolsonaro versus actual economic policy? And whether, how you're reading this development in the broader context of what Donald Trump has been saying about BRICS nations. Could this escalate into a wider confrontation with the bloc? And what does this mean for, future of such emerging market alliances?
I think on the BRICS dimension, anything is possible. And of course, BRICS just hosted the recent BRICS summit. Prior to that, some months ago, Donald Trump threatened a 10% tariff on any nations looking to devalue or diminish the role of the US dollar as the globally primary currency. When it comes to US-Brazil relations specifically, I think, your guess, frankly, is as good as mine as to what's motivating Donald Trump. But similar to Australia, if you look at the letter to Brazil, and I briefly skimmed it this morning, I've been looking at a number of these letters, it's a ragtag of allegations and falsifications, etc., that are a pretext for what Mr. Trump has decided to do today. Tomorrow he might decide to do something different. So this really is arbitrary trade policy making at its worst. And I don't know what President Lula in Brazil has done particularly to defend Donald or offend Donald Trump this time.
All right, Professor Draper, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. Peter Draper, Professor and Executive Director of Institute for International Trade at the University of Adelaide.